The Dragon's Hoard, by Elton Gar. Omsin saw the massive blue and green dragon flying over the city of Amberleaf in slow, silent loops. It was common to see Tyirith, who had lived near the city for almost 200 years. During those years, it had grown from a small town to a great city, and in all that time no adventurer had ever found the dragon's hoard. Many believed that he must not have one, but Omsin knew better. Every dragon had a hoard. It was as much a part of being a dragon as breathing fire and flying. Omsin rushed to the top of the tallest building he could reach, in time to watch the dragon more carefully. Its green and blue scales reflected the sun almost as well as the ocean, making it hard to look directly at the dragon. But Omsin watched him as he circled the city one last time and then descended into the great square. That was where most people went to view Tyirith. It was there that the city leaders would give the dragon several cows, sheep, or even from time to time a camel. But Omsin didn't want to see where the dragon was given the fruits of someone else's labor. He wanted to see the hoard. That meant watching him when he left the city. While he waited, he watched the port and the great ships. Men had barely even stopped unloading the ships when the dragon flew over. The people in this city had become too used to the dragon. Omsin would be able to see the direction it flew. That should give him at least a hint of where the dragon's lair was. A few minutes later, he watched the dragon fly off towards a few small hills in the barren north, a land that didn't even have enough plants for cattle. He watched as the huge blue and green wings moved slowly as the dragon circled and landed somewhere in the barrens. Dropping everything he had planned for the day, Omsin ran to his home and grabbed the already packed backpack. He bought 2 loaves of bread and a block of cheese on the way out of town, and ran towards the location where he hoped to find evidence of the dragon. It took 2 hours to reach the large rocks near where he had seen the dragon go. There he found something he hadn't expected, a small stone home that appeared to have been there for centuries. It didn't look as if anyone lived here, and if he didn't find the dragon, it would be a good place to wait the few weeks until the dragon returned for its next meal, in hopes that he could get a better idea where it was. He knocked on the door, and a tall man in his early 30s answered. He was dressed in far finer clothes than Omsin would have expected in the wilderness, with some of the rarest colors. The blue shirt with green inlays suggested someone who was wealthy, perhaps a merchant or a lord.
"I was just checking to see if anyone lived here,"
Omsin said.
"I live in the city, but this is my place. I come here from time to time."
Omsin looked around. The stone building was nicer than most of the homes in the city, but it wasn't where he would expect to find a noble. The stone home, weathered by centuries of wind and rain, stood resilient against the harsh elements of the barren north. Its facade, adorned with intricate carvings of dragons and other mythical creatures, spoke of a craftsmanship long forgotten. Vines, stubborn in their persistence, crept up the sides, weaving through the carvings and giving the impression that the house had grown organically from the rocky ground. Omsin stepped inside cautiously, and the interior revealed even more about the mysterious dwelling. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and something elusive, almost like the lingering traces of magic. The furniture, though simple, bore the marks of careful artistry, each piece telling a silent tale of a bygone era. The hearth, long cold, hinted at nights spent in contemplation and solitude. As Omsin looked deeper into the stone house, he saw a room filled with shelves of ancient tomes, their spines cracked and well-worn. Dust danced in the filtered sunlight that seeped through a small, high window, adding an ethereal quality to the room. In another corner, a map lay spread across a table, its surface dotted with markings and lines. The walls of the dwelling were adorned with faded tapestries. The only other room he could see was the kitchen. Though small, it held signs of a life lived, with pots and pans polished to a gleam and a few herbs hanging to dry. In the main room, a well-used chair sat by the hearth, its back facing the entrance, as if waiting for the return of an occupant who had momentarily stepped away. The tall man said,
"I will be returning to the city tomorrow, but you are welcome to stay here tonight. I will sleep in the chair and you can use my bed."
It was a kind offer, but a night's sleep wasn't what Omsin was looking for, so he said,
"I am seeking the dragon's lair and the hoard that all dragons have. I saw him fly near here. I hoped to wait for him and then follow him to his lair."
"And what will you do when you get there? Tyirith is a powerful dragon, and dragons will defend their hoard to their death."
"Dragons are foul creatures of greed and twisted power. My family has hunted them and knows their weaknesses. You do not fight a dragon directly. Once I know where its lair is, I will discover what it hoards. With that knowledge, I will be able to lay a trap for the beast."
"And then you will slay it and steal its hoard."
I will only take enough of the hoard to survive, while I hunt down the next monster.
You mean anything that isn't human?
The dragon said.
There are plenty of human monsters too. I may be one of them, but at least I'm aimed at the other monsters.
You may stay here. It has served as a place for silent reflection and growth for me. I hope it can do the same for you.
The night descended upon the barren north, casting long shadows that danced across the rugged landscape. Omsin, after a simple meal of bread and cheese, found himself seated by the hearth in the well-used chair. The flames flickered, casting a warm glow on the walls adorned with faded tapestries. As Omsin settled into the quiet of the stone home, the tall man, seemingly at ease in the shadows, spoke in a low, contemplative voice.
You speak of monsters, Omsin. It's a peculiar thing, defining what truly makes a creature monstrous.
Omsin's gaze shifted from the dancing flames to the intricate carvings on the walls.
Monsters are creatures that spread fear and destruction. They hoard power and wealth for themselves, blinded by their insatiable greed.
The man nodded thoughtfully, the light revealing a depth of wisdom in his eyes.
You speak true. But isn't it fascinating how monsters come in many forms? Some wear scales and breathe fire, while others don the guise of men.
Omsin furrowed his brow, sensing a weight in the man's words.
What are you getting at?
The man leaned forward, the light playing on his features.
Tyirith, the dragon you seek, does not hoard gold and jewels.
Omsin regarded the man with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity.
And how would you know that?
I have lived here a long time and learned a great deal.
Osman went to the bedroom. The bed was larger than even the huge man needed, and softer than he had expected. But he couldn't sleep. There was something odd about the strange man who had invited him into his home, without even the exchange of names. He took one of the long metal candle holders and wrapped his fingers around it, waiting for the other man to slip into the room to kill him. But the night was calm and quiet. Near sunrise, he slipped into a restless slumber that was interrupted by the smell of food being cooked. He put the candlestick away and made his way to the small kitchen. There he saw his host cooking 2 large pieces of beef. He glanced up at Omsin and said,
I allowed you to eat the bread and cheese yesterday because you were suspicious of me. But I hope that this morning you will accept my hospitality.
The two ate in silence, and Osman watched the other man carefully until he said,
As you have determined I am a wealthy man. If you wish to learn of the dragon, you may stay here. I have books of lore in my library, and the pantry is full. But I must return to Amberleaf.
That was almost exactly what Osman wanted. He wouldn't even have to return to town for supplies, and once the man had left, he would be free to relax and enjoy the home. But it seemed too simple, and Omsin had been doing this a long time. So he allowed the man to leave, and then once he was partway into town he followed. If the man saw him, he would simply explain that he had decided to go into town for supplies. But the man didn't see him, and once they were in town it became far easier for Osman, who looked like almost anyone else in the city, while the other man was tall enough that he could be easily picked out of a crowd. The tall man twisted through the market. In some places he would give a merchant something, and in others he would buy something. It all felt mostly random, and there were times that Omsin was convinced that the man knew he was being followed. What was most strange was even though he had come into the city with only a handful of things, by the time he left the third market, he had a pack full of valuable things, but, so far as Osman could see, no one had really come out behind on any of the trades he made. It was practically magic. Then he turned down a narrow street, and when Osman turned, he saw the tall man standing in the center of the street waiting for him. He seemed even taller than before, and he said,
Have you seen enough?
Enough to know you are Tyirith, the dragon, but I still haven't quite figured out what your scheme is.
Because I am just trying to help.
Tyirith said.
Dragons don't help other people. They help themselves.
And that is why there are so few of us left. We never worked together. Instead, we hoarded wealth and didn't even use it. And I might have been the same, but a few centuries ago, the mayor of this city made a deal. They would feed me, and in return, I wouldn't kill them.
A good deal for you, I suppose,
Osman said.
Better than you know. Dragons are lonely. So I began to speak to the humans when they fed me. And over 100 years or so, I began to like them. And of course I continued to gather treasure, which made many people come here to escape to the one place free of my attacks. Then one of them made a suggestion that solved our problem.
What is that?
Osman asked.
They gave me the town, not just the land or the buildings. Everything in it. There are rules about what I can do, but technically every person who is here is my property, which means that
The entire city of Amberleaf is your hoard.
Omsin said.
And I've been growing it for centuries. The wealthier and happier the people here are, the bigger my hoard is, and so I'll protect that with my life.
The dragon said.
Author's note. I had always assumed I had written a lot about dragons because it's such a huge part of fantasy, and I have included dragons in my stories before. The Middlemen's stories have a dragon who is a main character, but I don't know if I've ever written a short story with a dragon in it, so I've decided to remedy that. I enjoyed this story, but one of the reasons I like subverting the trope is because it leaves room for more stories about dragons without them all feeling too similar. There is, of course, also a message that I think is one that is important for the modern world. It's not just that cooperation is a good thing, but that when we look out for the good of those who have less, it has far more value to the economy than when they help those who already have enough. And the powerful would help themselves more by remembering that a rising tide lifts all boats. Don't forget to leave comments and sign up to get more free stories every week. Elton Gar.